WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Poverty is going up in Detroit. So too are the costs of food and housing. All of this means that many are struggling to pay their bills, and homelessness, particularly for kids, is on the rise. A lot of these problems are big. To solve them, Detroit relies on money from the federal and state government. So, how much can one city with limited resources do to halt the rate of homelessness and even reverse it? With the mayoral election next month, we have invited Anthony Eade on to discuss these things. He's the senior director of public policy for the Community Development Advocates of Detroit and the policy and advocacy coordinator for COTS, a housing agency in the city. Anthony, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So there are a lot of reasons that homelessness is going up. I want to talk about the impact the federal government has had on this problem. Now, you run a nonprofit. How much worse are things getting because of both President Trump's recent budget law, tariffs, and cuts from federal government agencies?
That is a great question. I think the current environment is not only affecting the nonprofit community here in Detroit, but really nationwide. We are in an environment where nonprofits are feeling targeted, not only via the budget, but also perhaps politically because of the issues that they champion. And those that have it being in that kind of environment is going to cause negative downstream effects for Detroit families and our community out here.
So homelessness is rising, but homelessness among children has specifically increased, which is really concerning. Why is that the case?
Yeah, and that is definitely a fact. The data shows that just in this past year, there was a 16% increase in overall homelessness in the city, but a 35% increase in families who are experiencing homelessness. And that's defined by families that have children. And I think that's a really important point to bring up because I think as a society, when people think of homeless individuals, they don't usually think of children or families, especially right now in this environment where homelessness is being policed, it's being treated as a crime instead of the systemic failure that it is. It's treated more as an individual issue. But when we think about those individuals, we often don't think of the children that are experiencing this homelessness. Now, as for why, there are a lot of reasons. The biggest reason is probably housing supply and the cost of obtaining affordable housing here in the city of Detroit.
Right. This is at the center of this issue is a lack of affordable housing. Do you think that the rise in family homelessness and child homelessness, do you think that that could at all help to change the hearts and minds of people who say, well, if you're homeless, you must have did something wrong, that you must have did something to deserve that, which unfortunately is still a prevalent attitude that people have in order to accept that homelessness is such a problem, right?
I mean, not only do people think that, but I think that mindset is getting worse. We see the policing of homelessness in places like Washington, D.C., in places like California, perhaps coming up in Chicago where, the federal administration is sending in National Guard, Army forces in order to get the homelessness problem under control. And it is a problem, but the blame that we as a society put on the individual instead of the system that creates homelessness is a real problem. And we do see it increasing, and I think unless something changes, that mindset is going to continue to increase.
So blame the system, not the person. Look at where the cracks in the system are as opposed to zooming in on a person's choices. But you're saying that overall, the political climate right now and the federal government's moves to criminalize homelessness are deepening the divisions, that notion of us versus them, because previous to Trump getting back into office, we know that there were cities throughout the country that were moving to criminalize homelessness more and more, but we were not seeing it on this level. We were not seeing it on a federal level the way that we're seeing it right now.
100%. How you said it is exactly right. We have not seen it on the level that it is now, where it's being criminalized to the extent that it is. And it is absolutely a systemic issue. We know how to solve these issues. We know the problems that people who are experiencing homelessness face. We know that it is a systemic issue, and it's multifaceted. It is an income issue. It is a housing supply issue. It is a healthcare issue. I mean, being homeless affects so many aspects of life, but we do know how to solve it, and that's part of what we do at COTS. We're not only an organization that houses folks, but we try to get them back to self-sufficiency and getting back to being productive members of society. And we know it's possible. It's just if we have the will as a people to do it.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about some of the solutions on a citywide level, because as we know, Detroit is about to have a new mayor. So I want to discuss some of the programs that person should be thinking about when they take office. I mean, let's look at the Housing Trust Fund, for one. That's an avenue where the city can build more affordable housing units or subsidize the units that it has already. How should the city strategically invest in this?
I'm glad you bring that up. The Housing Trust Fund, as passed by City Council a few years ago, is a unique thing that we have in the city of Detroit that allows investment into affordable housing, especially for very low-income individuals. We use a metric here in Detroit called AMI, average median income. It's not only for Detroit. Right now, it's countywide, which is probably something we need to look at getting fixed. But the Housing Trust Fund can help fund housing for folks who are at 30% or under the AMI level of everyone else. So that is one avenue we can take. I'm happy to say that it is something that the current city council has championed. Council President Sheffield especially has championed it in the past, and it is my hope that she continues to champion it in the future if she does win and becomes Detroit's next mayor. But also all of city council needs to contribute. Now, one way they can do that is during the annual budget review. Last year, advocates with the Housing Trust Fund asked for a $10 million allocation. The city council was able to allocate $1 million, which we're certainly appreciative of, but it doesn't come close to getting the job done.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Anthony Eid, the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for COTS. That's a housing agency in Detroit. And we're discussing what policies Detroit's next mayor should enact to get more people housed. Now, of course, Anthony, all of this costs money, and Detroit has a limited amount of dollars available. What kinds of cuts might the city have to make in order to make sure that everyone has a bed or housing unit?
I'm not sure if cuts have to be made. I think we might just need to be creative with how we're spending the resources that are already there. The city does have a little bit of a surplus right now. We have not had a budget deficit in over a decade. We're seeing new revenue streams potentially come up. You may have heard of a potential entertainment tax. You might have heard of a potential tax being allocated with the Detroit Soccer Stadium that's coming into play and their community benefits ordinance. There are a lot of avenues there. We just have to get creative with how we're actually using the money.
Yeah, let's talk about that creativity, though. Where do you put the money for the most benefit? Do you put it toward, let's say, Not only providing housing, but what about prevention? What about treatment? And I guess I'm talking more about your work specifically with COTS.
Yeah, well, there's a few pieces of low-hanging fruit in the city, and one is CAM, which is the phone number that people who are experiencing homelessness call if they're experiencing an emergency and they're on the street on a cold night. Now, right now, CAM is open Monday through Friday until 5 p.m. And we know that someone experiencing distress, a lot of times that distress doesn't happen between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So I think the lowest hanging fruit would be for the city to staff and resource CAM to be a 24 hours, 7-day-a-week system. That way, no matter what time somebody's experiencing distress, they can call it in and see if there is an available shelter bed to be able to send them.
Anthony, if I may jump in here, I mean, this is the number one thing that I hear from people experiencing homelessness that I talk to when I'm, passing someone on the street and we get into a little bit of a conversation. They bring this up first and foremost as one of the biggest barriers to accessing shelter. Do you know of conversations happening right now to change that? I mean, what kinds of investments would it take to make CAM Detroit able to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
There are conversations happening. I think it is something that whoever becomes the next mayor of Detroit has to do in order to fix this issue. I'm not quite sure about what the cost that would be associated with it, but it's already a place that's open. It's already staffed. You just have to increase the hours. So I can't imagine it would be, millions of dollars in order to make this happen. Now, that's one part of the issue. The other part is when someone calls CAM. Right now, every shelter bed in the city is full. So it then becomes a question of, okay, you're able to get through. Now, where do we put these people? And that is, excuse me, that's going to have to come in the form of the city providing resources to nonprofits, to people who champion these issues in order to open more shelter beds. And the city is trying. After we had that tragedy earlier in the year where 2 children died in a
casino parking
unfortunately,
garage.
Casino parking garage, right? That was preventable. That did not need to happen, and it shouldn't have happened. And I think most people around the city infrastructure realize, hey, this shouldn't have happened, and they're trying to fix it. One way is by providing more shelter beds for these folks to be able to go on a temporary basis.
It sounds like Detroit, though, a city where many residents are living in poverty. I mean, the number has rose where it's now over I believe over 35%. It feels as though Detroit is going to have some tough decisions to make. We know that federal dollars from the federal rescue plan are going away. Do you think that this is going to be a turning point kind of moment for Detroit when it comes to making some tough decisions about housing?
I sure hope it is. And there are avenues there. We have a very large nonprofit ecosystem here in the city. Actually, a lot of times in our city, nonprofits do a lot of the work that city departments do in other cities, but that's how we're structured here in Detroit. But the avenues are there to provide housing. There are also avenues to build housing and make sure that affordable housing can get into the hands of residents that we're starting to see. And those could be avenues like the community land trust ordinance that's currently being discussed by the city council, things like making sure that land from the land bank can get back into the hands of the residents of the city. All of these things is going to have a trickle-down effect into making housing more affordable. Now, as you mentioned, it's also an issue of income. As long as Detroiters have a low income, this is going to be an issue. So investing in resources like workforce development, like education, like healthcare for residents, it all contributes to that systematic inequality that we were speaking of earlier and getting somebody back on their feet and getting them back to being productive members of society.
Thanks for helping us to think about those systems. Anthony Eade is the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for COTS. That's a housing agency in Detroit. Anthony, thank you for joining me on the Metro.
Thank you.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. Stay with us.